Okay, so we're going to talk about fonts and importing fonts into Scribus in this tutorial. I have the logo from the television show Rick and Morty that I'm using to make this fun wafer box for the purposes of a demonstration and for our class project on the nutrition label. So I was looking at the font, and it's a very unusual font. If you just look at the properties, it's got these sort of rounded edges with a thick text outline and cursive lettering, and then the R in Rick has this extra piece that comes off of the arm, or I think maybe that's called the leg in typesetters terms. We call this a swash. Now, I couldn't find a font that has a swash like this. You could theoretically adjust your font to include a swash, but I was poking around on Reddit because there are a lot of people who take this show very seriously. Somebody actually went through and tried to find a font that's similar to this, which is good for us because we can have a design that's a little closer to the original that they had on the show. So um, after poking around on Reddit, I found a Redditor who posted that this font, Birds of Paradise, is the font that's closest to the one that they used here. Now, we're not going to get an exact match because this is, as you can probably tell from the inconsistencies in width of the stroke, this is hand-drawn, or not exactly hand-drawn, probably done in a program like Illustrator or whatever they use to animate the show. So we're not going to get an exact match, but we can get pretty close, which is good enough for the purposes of this exercise. So I downloaded this font. It's called Birds of Paradise. And I got it off of the website, by the way. It's called Dafont, like DAFONT. They have a lot of uh, people who upload fonts there. They either work in foundries, which is sort of the old school name for the businesses that design fonts from back when you used to have cast metal type. You know, you would cast molten metal into the type. They're still called foundries, but we would call them, I guess, font design firms or something like that in layman's terms. Usually, you're going to get a couple files with your font. You're going to get the .ttf file, that's the true type font file, and then you're going to get a license file. And here's the license that they included. It's an image, which is a little unusual. You don't see that too much. Um, but they're saying you can't use this for commercial purposes, but you can use it for individual purposes, which is good enough for us. Everything we do in this class is fair use, essentially, because you're creating it for educational purposes. As long as you're not planning on selling it commercially, there's no problem with using any fonts or images in this course. We'll talk more about copyright later on in the course. So the license says it's okay for use. Here's our TTF file. I'm going to show you a website here. This website is called Wakami Fondue, which I think is a kind of a clever riff on the phrase "What can my font do?" But what this website does is you can drag and drop your TTF file in here, and it'll give you all the statistics on the font, who designed it. So here's the name of the foundry. It tells you how many characters they've got. Layout features. This one only has one, but some fonts will have different widths, stroke widths. So different. We'd call those different weights. You can have bold, italic, small caps, etc. This one only has the one layout feature. So here we go. We've got all of the different characters in our font. Some of these are just empty, or they have a placeholder. Some of them are not defined, but we can see that this font, for instance, has all these stylized punctuation and other marks, including a stylized ampersand. And it's got all italic lettering. The R, I think, is what we were most interested in. You can see that the R doesn't contain a swash, but we're going to have to just live without it. And then if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see the different variants on all the characters used in other languages. This is something, if you're typesetting a document in a language that uses characters with these diacritic marks or diaeresis or an umlaut, you need to make sure you have that. If you don't have that character in your character set, and you can't approximate it in any way, it's not going to work for the purpose of typesetting that word that's not in English. In English language, words don't typically have any diacritics, but certainly anything that's French or Spanish or German or anything that you, a word that you might be borrowing from another language and putting into your typesetted document, you're going to need these characters that have the diacritics in them. So make sure that you check one way or another that you've got those. And then you've got some more stylized stuff down here, like angled quotes. Here's the euro sign. So this has everything that we basically need. But I just wanted to show you this website in case you're wondering. Sometimes fonts will have some interesting glyphs or dingbats or fleurons that you can throw into a project if they're suitable. Let's talk about importing it into Scribus. So here's my file location. When you're in Scribus, I'm going to move some of this stuff out of the way. When you're in Scribus, if you see this new document window when you first open it, X that out because you need to get to File and then Preferences. And we're going to go down to Fonts over here, and it shows you all the fonts you have currently loaded. I've got, not a ton, but several. But then what you can do is specify additional paths, and that's what we want to do. We want to tell Scribus where to find our new font. So I'm going to click Add, and then I have it set right here. Now, you want to select a folder when you're doing this. So you don't want to click into the actual folder that has your font. And if the font file came zipped when you downloaded it as a .zip file, you need to extract that file before adding it to Scribus because it won't read it if it's still in a zipped folder. So here's the folder we want. I'm going to select that folder. I'll click Apply. Well, here, you can see the path down here. I'll click Apply, and then I'll click OK. Now, that should, in theory, be enough to import the font into Scribus. I'm going to open up the project that we're working on here, and we'll check. If you go to just File and Open from this window and try to add the file, it may not work, but let's see here. I'm going to make a new text box. We'll just type in here, oops, it's still in caps lock, test, and actually I'm going to hit undo a couple times because I think I accidentally moved one of the guides, and I don't want to mess with that. Okay, yeah, I did. So let me get this out of the way and try this out. Test, that's good enough. Let's go into the text editor frame. We haven't talked about this in the tutorials yet, but we will get to this when we start placing our text on the page. I'm going to highlight the text that I want to change, and then, what was it called? I think Birds of Paradise. Birds of Paradise, there we go. So I will update the text frame, and it worked. There we go. Let's make this a little bigger, so that we can actually see what we're working on. That's still not very big. Let me get the properties window. Oops. There it is. Sorry, it's on my other monitor. I have to negotiate these things. Okay, let's get this text a little larger so that we can appreciate everything the font has to offer. Come on now. There we go. I'm going to make this 128. And then we need to expand the frame so that it'll actually fit our much larger text. There we go. Okay, we can zoom in. This looks pretty good in terms of what we're looking for. Let's take a look. Why don't we type some of the, oops, simple is the first word in our logo. And let's take a look at the logo itself and see how good of a match we've got. Oops. Pull that back up. Yeah, pretty good, I think. It looks like a pretty good match. The L doesn't have the loop, which is a little bit different. Um, but apart from that, we're pretty close. Now, we're never going to get it exact. What's likely happened is the person who was drawing this frame in the cartoon, they used a font like this as the basis for their drawing, and then they made some modifications. So they put the looped L and then the swash on the R. So, but this will work fine for the purposes of our exercise. So we've got the font imported, and you can follow this procedure basically just as I outlined, no matter where you get your fonts from. The only thing I'll say is be careful when you're downloading fonts that you're downloading from a reputable site. Probably the one we'll go to the most often is Google Fonts, and if we wanted to, say, view... Oops, that's sorry, that's not the specimen space, that's for searching. If we wanted to look for something close in Google Fonts, we could do that as well. You know, there's a whole bunch of handwritten fonts. This one actually doesn't look like too bad of a match, although there's a lot of elements actually looking at that closer that don't really match up. When you go to let's just say for the purposes of this course that we're going to grab this font. So you can download the font family from Google right here, and that will take you to your file manager where you can download it. It'll come as a zip file. So remember, extract the file, point to the folder in Scribus, and if you want to, you can use that What Can a Font Do website to see all of the glyphs in the font file before you import it, just to make sure that it's going to do the job you need it to do. And then once you have the file on your computer unzipped, go to Preferences, and you can't, I think you can do that while a file is open, but you probably don't want to do that. Just open up Scribus, add the path to the font over here in additional paths. Yeah, you have to close the document before you can do that. And then if you don't see it right away, just close out Scribus and then open it up again, type a text or enter a text frame, see if you can select it as a font. And if you still can't, that means there's something wrong. Either the path is wrong, or the font file is broken, or more likely than not, you just probably forgot to unzip the file. So those are the basics for adding a new font into Scribus for use when you're typesetting, and that's the end of this tutorial.